Hello, and thank you for joining me on this presentation where I'll be exploring how startups can create a business strategy in an efficient and relatively quick way. And to do this, I'll be introducing you to a methodology that I developed and which I use the acronym A.L.I.G.N with. So I'm Mike Kelly. I'm more than 20 years as an entrepreneur and have developed multiple international businesses over those years. I'm also a qualified chartered director. I mentor a lot of startups, do training for startups, and also I'm an angel investor. And my specialization is really in helping business to business startups build their businesses overseas outside of Ireland. My LinkedIn and email addresses are here if you want to get in touch. This presentation about the A.L.I.G.N methodology is really here to help make it a little bit easier for startups to get their heads around how to develop a business strategy. You can read lots of books and spend huge amounts of time on that, but startups typically don't have that. And once I qualified as a chartered director, I took much of the learnings from there and learnings from my time as an entrepreneur, and within my own consulting practice I built out the A.L.I.G.N methodology. And I think the acronym as well is helpful because with business strategy, this is really what you're trying to achieve. You're trying to align your business and organization with the external environment, making sure that it is fit for purpose, but you're also trying to align your internal teams, your own people, to make sure that you're all rowing in the same direction. So I hope you find this useful. First of all, let's just look at some of the reasons businesses fail. Well, according to the research, 63% of businesses fail within their first 4 years. You probably already noticed there's a very high failure rate. And one of the other pieces from research is that 46% of those failures are caused by a lack of effective planning. And essentially, that comes down to strategy that people, and I have fallen foul to this myself, when they start businesses, can be too short term focused. One of the things that we'll be talking about today is vision and mission. And I started my first company when I was in my mid 20s. And my attitude to vision and mission at the time was, look, I need to get some sales in just to keep the lights on. So things like vision and mission, I'm sure they're great, but they're not particularly helpful to me right now. As I look back, that was a mistake. That was far too short term focused. Yes, getting the sales in was critically important. I had to get the lights on and get the business up and running. But in the longer term, that really held me back and caused that business ultimately to fail. So, a long term perspective generated by strategy is the key to getting effective planning in place. And much of the reason, of course, why businesses fail is that, look, the sales simply don't come in. And the sales aren't coming in because marketing has failed. Why is that? Well, much of that comes back to strategy as well. If you don't have your markets well defined, if you haven't put the work in to clearly define your market segments and your targeting, well, that means you have not achieved product market fit. And if you don't have product market fit, you're going out of business. Also, if you have a weak value proposition that is simply not compelling enough to customers to risk their money with your products and solutions, well, then that's going to cause failure as well. And then other things like weak messaging, inappropriate content, an inability to convert sales inquiries to close sales, all of these things are a big problem. But all of this ultimately comes back to the fact that you have a weak business strategy. All of these things are a reflection of either weak or non existent business strategy. So some entrepreneurs can be a bit more gung ho. They'll say, look, we don't have time for strategy. We've got to get on with this or we're going to miss the opportunity. Well, in the short term, you may win, but in the long term, that's going to kill you. So making sure that you've got a business strategy that is playing to your core strengths of your internal organization and also is aligned with and reflects the external market dynamics, that is the key to success. And anybody who has come across SWOT, the strengths, weakness, opportunities, and threats, will recognize that in there. That's what we're going to be talking about today, making sure that your internal environment of your own organization is uh, capable and has the right fit, and also that it is matching to the external environment as well. Interestingly, further research around high performing organizations shows that strategy is at the core of that. And here we're talking about long term sustainable high performance, not just short term wins. Businesses that are using strategic plans tend to be 12% more profitable. The firms who are using strategic planning are seeing an 80% increase in sales volume. So the long term impact on sales is enormous. And also, the return on capital tends to be higher as well. So, high performers use strategy. If you want to be a high performer over the long term, you need to have a well thought through strategy. And I really like this. And look, throughout this presentation, you're going to see the logo for Ridge Consulting. That's my old consulting business where I developed much of this. So ignore the logo. But I haven't stolen any of this. I created it. But what I really like about this chart, you can see the blue curve is the path of high performers. And here we're talking about vision. So over time, vision is what steers successful organizations. The brown curves, these are your innovation curves, and as you probably are familiar with, these S curves, they start off slowly, then the innovation accelerates, and this is where massive profits and market share are gained. But then they always start to drop off as the innovation diffuses throughout the market, returns tend to drop. And it's the very successful companies that are able to make these successive jumps between S curves. They're the ones that have success over the course of decades and even multiple centuries. But all of those missions must be steered by something much longer term, and that's where we're talking about vision. We'll get into these two things in a little bit more detail shortly, but I think this picture represents exactly where you want to be with your strategy. In the next 3 years, for example, that's going to be your mission statement. That's what you're going to achieve, the objectives that you're going to achieve in the next 3 years. The second S curve is what you're going to want to achieve in years 3 to 6. You don't yet know what that mission is, and the same with the third S curve as well. You don't know what any of those things are because the environment hasn't changed yet. You won't see that until you're coming further on down the track. However, you need this overarching goal, something that's called a BHAG, big, hairy, audacious goal that stretches decades into the future. You may never be able to achieve it, but it's something that will transform the world. And it's that vision that steers you when you are looking for your next mission, when the innovation that you perhaps launched your business with is dropping off. So I hope this helps as a starting point. Okay, let's jump into the A.L.I.G.N methodology, and keep in mind all the time through this, the acronym itself is telling you what we're trying to achieve. We're trying to align all of your employees together so that everyone is moving in the same direction, and we're also trying to align your organization with the wider, broader market and all of the external factors, political, social, technological, legal, geopolitical, all that stuff that's going to affect your business if you're going to win in an international setting. And here we have a quick overview of the A.L.I.G.N methodology that I developed at Ridge Consulting. There's a couple of things that I really like about this. Firstly, it's quick. It can help startups very quickly run through all of the elements that need to be considered when building strategy. The next is they can do that in a systematic way. One phase follows the next logically. And thirdly, it gives you some discipline, it gives you some structure, and it makes it easier. So rather than trying to pull together lots of different books, lots of different training courses, all the rest of it, it essentially gives you a framework where the founders and the key members of their team can sit down together and work through the framework, getting all of their ideas, and hopefully agree what it is they're trying to achieve. So we start off with, what is it that we aspire to achieve with this organization, both in the very long term, and that's your vision, and in the shorter term, say the next 3 years, and that's your mission. Then we need to look externally, outside of ourselves, outside of the broader market. We look out at all of the external factors that are going to affect us as an organization, a business, when we go out there into the wider world and engage. Then we need to look internally at our internal capabilities, our skill sets, and then by comparing the two of those things, externally, internally, and then what it is that we're trying to achieve, well, that should start to show us where are our gaps, where are our capability gaps. We can't possibly have everything that we need right now. We're a startup. We can't possibly afford everything that we need right now because we're a startup, at least if we're a bootstrap startup. So what's the gap? What are the things that we need to put in place, and over what time frame, and how are we going to prioritize those things? And with all of that, that will give us some ideas around our strategy, whether it's our first strategy or whether it's a new direction. In a time like this, with what's happened in 2020 with COVID-19, everybody's strategies are not thrown out the window, but certainly dramatically affected, more so than possibly any time in decades. So this is also an excellent framework for revisiting your strategy and seeing if you need to take a new direction. Also, if you feel you're getting to the point, at the end point of one of your S curves, and you're looking around about what is the leap that we need to make, again, this type of methodology can bring a framework to help you as a team discuss this and evaluate everything that needs to be considered. Let's start then by looking at the Aspire element of the A.L.I.G.N methodology. We've already looked at the S-curves and how vision guides multiple missions through their S-curve, so everything links together. And this is the point of the vision. It should really paint a picture of how the world will look in the future and your organization's role in that. And the point of this is that it should significantly stretch the organization. It should significantly stretch your imagination. It needs to be a big, hairy, audacious goal. That's something referred to by Built to Last, one of the great books of business. It should have a long-term horizon, so maybe 15 or even more years. A key point is that it may not even be achievable. The whole point of this is that it is visionary. It is a really stretch goal. So if you think it's something that should be relatively realistic to achieve, well, then maybe you haven't thought it through enough. So maybe get some other people to challenge you around this and make sure that it is really something that is a massive stretch goal that will motivate not just you but also your team, and also guide the direction of your organization over the long term. An example I really like is from Microsoft back in 1980. Their vision at the time was a real stretch goal and somewhat unbelievable to think it could be achieved, but it was to have a computer on every desk and in every home. At the time, computers were essentially mid-range and mainframes. It was only the advent of the PC. So if somebody had told you back then that there was going to be multiple computers in your home, you probably wouldn't have believed them. So a great example of vision. Mission then is the next part of Aspire, and that's a shorter time frame, shorter horizon. It should match to the S-curves, or those economic cycles, technological cycles, and so on. Each of the missions should be guided by the vision. The whole point of missions is that they link together so that over time each is treated as a stepping stone on the way to achieving your overall vision. Also, unlike vision, which really should not be quantifiable because it's a massive stretch goal, missions should be quantifiable. They should have objectives and goals with targets that can be hit or missed. A good example, again, is Microsoft. So in 1980, their mission was to become the dominant desktop operating system, and then they jumped to another S curve. So for the 90s, it was to become the dominant personal and SMB applications provider. So you can see how these missions can change, yet fall under the overall guidance of vision. One thing that entrepreneurs can be guilty of, and in fact many leadership teams can be guilty of, is spending too much time looking internally and getting involved in groupthink and really navel gazing about their own organization. Looking outside of your organization is an essential part of strategy. Really, without this piece, you're not building a strategy at all, because no matter what you come up with, it won't match to your market and to your wider environment. Pestel analysis is a really interesting way of approaching this. It provides you with both a framework and a system to formalize how you evaluate the wider environment and how it is impacting on your organization, but more importantly, the trajectory of changes and how they are likely to impact on your organization in the future. That's really the point of doing this, trying to get your own worldview of how will the world look in the future and how will all of these different elements look. And the elements in Pestel are political, economic, social, technological, environment, and legal. Now, there may be elements there that you think are missing when it comes to your organization. Maybe there's something else. That's absolutely fine. This is just a tool, it's just a framework to help you systematically review and analyze the external environment and how it will impact on your organization in the future, and also give you ideas about how you can mitigate against the worst consequences of some of those changes. It will also help you understand maybe there are some new opportunities or some new threats that you haven't considered before. The most important thing is it will force you and your team to look outside of your organization and look at that wider environment. Internal is a little bit easier. This is what most people consider strategy to be, looking at your own organization, your resources, your capabilities. But there's a way of doing this that is tougher than perhaps you are used to doing, and that's really valuable. This is called V.R.I.N, and it stands for valuable, rare, inimitable, and non-substitutional. It's a way of listing out all of the things that you consider to be your core competences, your strengths, your distinctive capabilities, and asking yourself, I think this is valuable, but is this valuable to my customers? If it's not valuable to your customers, then unless you've got an iPhone on your hands here, an iPhone type product, then it may not run in the marketplace. Okay, Steve Jobs anticipated needs that customers didn't. Sometimes that works. Most of the time it doesn't. So a good question to ask, is this just valuable to me and my team, or is it valuable to customers? How can you go about finding that out and testing it before you go down that route? Is it rare? Does everybody already have this, or is it pretty much a commodity? Is it inimitable? Can this particular resource or strength be easily copied, or are there barriers to entry for that to slow down the entrance at least? And is it non-substitutional? Can somebody else just go to my customers and offer them something else which is cheaper and faster? It may not be as good, but customers are looking to have certain jobs done. And if somebody else can get that job done for your customers without having to buy your product, well then you've got a substitute product, or competitor I should say. The final question to ask on this is, well, if it is valuable, if it is rare and so on, what additional things can you and your team do to make them even more so? So to build up even further barriers to entry and make it even more compelling and valuable to your customers. And once you've gone through this discipline and through this process, you've analysed the external environment, you've looked at your own internal strengths and weaknesses, you know where it is that you want to go. At that point, you should start to be able to identify the gaps in your current makeup, your current capabilities, skill sets, resources, and so on. Using something like a SWOT analysis will help here too. But this is really important because it helps you understand, we know where we want to go. we know what's going to hold us back in terms of the external environment. So we've also done internal analysis that now tells us what the gap is. So we can start to invest in order to position ourselves to take advantage of those opportunities in the future. And that's where we come to the final piece in the A.L.I.G.N methodology, building up either your first strategy or your new strategy. So for example, if you built a strategy, I'm talking to you in October of 2020. If you built a strategy this time last year, well, that is probably not so relevant now, because in March we got hit with COVID-19 and the world changed dramatically overnight. So you'll need a new strategy. But when you do that, you can go back to what is our aspiration? What is it that our vision is? We can still achieve that vision. Maybe we just need a new mission. So I like this framework where it runs through different questions. What is our winning aspiration? Where will we play and how will we win? Those two questions are the essence of strategy. Where will we play? That's your external environment. In which market segments will we try to be successful? And how will we win? That's your internal analysis. What core competences and distinct, unique capabilities will we bring to that marketplace so that we can beat the competition? And then you have your gap. What capabilities must be in place in order to do that? And then, of course, strategy must be built on a foundation of management systems. How do we monitor if we're on track or going off track? So these are all choices, and essentially that's what strategy is. It is a series of choices, and I think it's Michael Porter said strategy is also about what not to do. So you need to decide, where will we not play? What market segments could we enter, but we choose not to because they're simply not valuable enough for us, they're a distraction? And how will we not win? So you've got to choose which customer segment you want to serve and how you're going to serve and beat the competition. That means making choices not to do certain things. So all of strategy is this integrated cascade of choices that you and your management team must make in order to put things in place. You can probably tell from this presentation that I'm a big fan of tools and frameworks and all of those sort of things that can just give guidance and help in order to make very complex things, very complicated decisions, that little bit easier. And also, when you're doing this with a team of people, tools that can get everybody's ideas down onto a single page. So let's look at two more tools here. This first tool is the GE Matrix. It's been around for decades, but I think it's a really helpful way to start building out a strategy. There are two axes. I'm not going to go into this in huge detail, but the first axis is market attractiveness. And this will help you decide, where do we want to play? Which markets are highly attractive to us? So you can perhaps build out dozens of different market segments that you could go after, and then you can start to rate them according to their attractiveness factors, and bit by bit plot the different market segments on something like this to see which ones are the most attractive. And then the next axis essentially represents your internal strengths and resources. So you can start to look at, well, where are we strong in those market segments and where are we weak? The ultimate goal to all of this is to figure out, where are we now in terms of the markets we're targeting? Where do we want to be in 3 or 5 years' time? Which market segments are actually more attractive that we can't enter now because we simply don't have the capabilities to win there? And then what's the gap? What capabilities do we need to put in place? What resources do we need to build in order to get ourselves to that point where in 3 years' time we can not only compete in that particular market segment, but we can dominate it? So I think this is a really useful one. Just look up GE Matrix, you'll find it online. I'm a real fan of canvases of different types as well, because I think they're a great way of getting lots of information, lots of very complicated, difficult decisions, all distilled down onto a single page. And when you're working with a team of people as well, where you're all trying to decide and agree on strategy, I think this forces a level of discipline on you as a team that nothing else does. I had done some Googling, I couldn't find a strategy canvas, so we built this one in Ridge Consulting ourselves, and you can see it reflects the A.L.I.G.N methodology as well. I don't know if I'll be able to upload this to YouTube, so if you're watching this on YouTube, my contact details are at the end of this presentation. Drop me an email and I'll send that across to you. Let's wrap up then with a few key takeaways. Firstly, Marketing Myopia was a book written by Ted Levitt decades ago. It was about how marketers and businesses can often get myopic or tunnel vision on what they do. You need to step outside your business and make sure that you don't have business myopia as well. So stepping outside your business, using something like the A.L.I.G.N methodology, using something like pestel analysis so that you're getting a big picture and you're not just getting sucked into your own business and getting groupthink with your team. The vision and mission are very important for your long-term success. Not so much your success in the next 6 months. Of course, you got to get your sales and keep the lights on. But in terms of your long-term sustainable big wins, vision and mission are your handrails that will guide you when everything seems bleak and everything seems overwhelming and everything is changing too quickly. The external environment is really important to understand, so get your head out of your business on a regular basis and try to see the trajectory of how things are changing. Where is the ball going to? Run to that spot, don't run to where the ball is now. And have a clear picture of your current strengths and the additional future capabilities that you will need to build in order to achieve your vision and mission. You cannot achieve all of your goals with what you have now. Always keep an eye on that gap and always make sure that you're reinvesting to develop the relevant capabilities, the critical ones that get you from A to B. I hope you enjoyed this presentation. I hope it will simplify some of your strategy development in the future. Remember, strategy is something that you need to revisit regularly, especially when there are major changes in the external environment. Please feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn, or if I can help in any way, if you want any of the tools that I've mentioned here, drop me an email, mikekelly.ie@gmail.com. And all that remains now is for me to wish you well in your strategy development journey and your journey with your startup. Thank you. Goodbye.